Now, and we're joined by John Giles, Republican mayor of Mesa, Arizona, who endorsed Kamala Harris and is speaking tonight. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
There are these different themes, and viewers and citizens know. Some of them feel like, okay, sure, left-handed carpenters for Kerry. Sure, why not? Yes, everyone's welcome. And then there are themes that actually do seem to resonate. Tonight is Republicans for Harris. You are one of them, and you're an elected Republican, and not in a super blue state, I might add. Explain to us what tonight is about and what you're involved with, what you're trying to tell people.
Well, I'm here to talk to people like myself who are in the political middle, but feel maybe like we're politically homeless. We've been, in Arizona, we've been specifically invited to leave the party if we're not part of the MAGA. And so there's a lot of us that are disenfranchised. There's a lot of us that, from tradition and maybe from a policy point of view, don't necessarily feel entirely comfortable in the Democratic Party. But at the same time, we've seen Donald Trump. We're well aware of his faults, and many of us have concluded that he is ineligible to be the President of the United States. So my message is just to people like me in the political middle that this is not a year that we can follow misplaced loyalty and vote for a Republican at the top of the ticket. The best candidate in this race is Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and President Biden hit that note last night. As you know, there are places, including Arizona, where in his last election, he was effective at making an argument, at being inclusive, at rejecting efforts to paint the Democratic Party as somehow left or out of step with Arizona. This speech went in late into the evening last night, and a lot of people watched it. But for those who might not remember every moment, here was that moment about Harris.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. She'll be a president we can all be proud of. And she will be a historic president who puts her stamp on America's future.
That was his embrace. What do you say to people who are center or conservative and wary that they might have been warmer to Biden, but they're not sure about Harris, who is a newer national figure to many people? What do you say to them?
Yeah, I get that, and there's a lot of people in that category. I mean, she does she came to the office of vice president with a reputation of being a fairly progressive senator, and I think that was probably fair. But I've seen her evolve over the last 4 years. She's had this amazing on-the-job experience with Joe Biden, and I think the best predictor of future performance is past performance. And we've seen the Biden-Harris administration be a very centrist administration. They've accomplished some amazing bipartisan legislation through Congress, things like the CHIPS Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. These have resulted in billions of dollars of private investment in my community. I'm going to ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings every week because of all the investment that's coming to my city. That didn't happen under the Trump administration. So I think she is going to govern from a centrist position. Governor Walz obviously has that reputation as well. So there's a lot of comfort to be found in her past record.
Yeah, really interesting. Joy Reid and I watched the RNC, which had its type of outreach, Joy. But this isn't exactly Hulk Hogan. This is more like small-town Republicans. Your thoughts, Joy?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it is remarkable, Ari and Mayor Giles, to see so many Republicans being willing to come forward and not just say we reject Donald Trump, but to say we actually affirmatively support Vice President Harris, which is a different thing.
It is.
And yet, it's still a relatively small number. I know enough Republicans, Michael Steele is a dear friend, and others who I know their values don't align with Donald Trump. They couldn't look at themselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
And yet, yourself, Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who is also supporting. Why do you think that your numbers are relatively small? Because in addition to being an adjudicated sexual assaulter, a known liar, 34-count felon, and all the things we know about Donald Trump, he also loses a lot of elections.
Sure.
He loses Republicans elections. You think about the Kerry Lakes of the world in places like Arizona.
Right.
It's not like he's a winner.
No.
What do you think keeps so many of your Republican colleagues from not joining you?
Well, it is a bit of a mystery. I mean, you've seen all the Senate Republicans that when they were initially giving their thoughts about Donald Trump couldn't have been more condemning as far as his character and their predictions for total failure and the loss of the soul of the Republican Party if he were elected. We've seen all those things come to pass. But again, they step up and defend him. So you can only conclude that the political price to be paid for crossing Donald Trump is the end of your political.
Yeah.
So I've gotten an amazing outreach of people who are not elected officials in the Republican Party who stop me in the grocery store and say, thank you so much for giving voice to where I'm at. Like I said, there's this huge politically homeless population in the United States outside of elected officials.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to help them get more comfortable with Vice President Harris and understand that she is someone who's going to lead the debate.
I think one of the profound things about what you're doing is that you're not saying I'm leaving the Republican Party and I'm for Harris. You're a Republican for Harris. You're still fundamentally a Republican and what that used to mean. To you, if Donald Trump is defeated and there's a chance to rebuild the Republican Party, for you, what will that Republican Party be about, or what should it be about? What should its values be?
Well, we've always had an extreme right part of the Republican Party, kind of the John Birch, libertarian. And
Reagan and those guys ran out of the party.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the point, and I think the lesson to be learned from the Democratic Party, the success that you feel here is a big tent is a good tent. We've got people like Kerry Lake that are trying to turn it into a one sleeping bag tent, and that's just that's going to predict the demise of the Republican Party. So hopefully we will bottom out. Hopefully the MAGA Party will fail miserably, and not just at the top of the ticket, but up and down the ticket. And people like me will be welcomed back to the Republican Party, and a diversity of opinion will be tolerated and embraced in the Republican Party.